The taste of cold steel was the last thing Berya remembered before the world faded into a suffocating darkness. He had followed every rule in the Demon King's standards, yet those very laws led him straight to a hero's blade. Suddenly, a violent gasp tore through his lungs as he felt the hard surface of a stone floor beneath him. His hands were no longer stained with blood, but were clean and tucked into the sleeves of a formal academy robe. The familiar scent of sulfur and expensive incense confirmed he was back at the Demon King graduation ceremony. This was 15 years before his death, a time when he was still an idealistic prince of the underworld. On the stage stood the high priest, clutching the same standard manual that had guaranteed Berya's previous failure. The priest began to drone on about the sacred duty to build towers in fertile lands and kidnap princesses for mana. Berya felt a surge of cold fury as he remembered how that specific strategy made him an easy target for hero raids. Before his name could even be called, Berya stepped forward, interrupting the sacred silence of the hall. He reached for the ancient manual on the pedestal and with a single motion threw it into the ceremonial fire pit. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber as the elders rose from their seats in absolute horror. Berya declared that the age of following human written scripts for demon kings was officially over. The high priest screamed that such heresy would result in immediate banishment to the wasteland. This was exactly what Berya wanted, as the wasteland was the only place the heroes would never look for a king. He was stripped of his royal funding and teleported to the frozen peaks of the Urgust mountains. The wind howled like a dying beast as Berya landed in knee-deep snow miles away from civilization. Most demons would have died within hours, but Berya had spent his previous life studying the hidden ley lines of this world. He began to chant a forbidden architect's spell, one that utilized the earth's core instead of external sacrifices. The ground groaned and buckled as a spire of obsidian rock erupted from the mountain's crust. Unlike the gaudy castles of the past, this tower was sleek, reinforced, and built for total isolation. Berya stepped inside his new home, the temperature immediately shifting to a comfortable warmth. He knew that a demon king was nothing without a proper staff, but he refused to hire the typical incompetent minions. He needed individuals who were outcasts in their own societies, just as he was now an outcast in his. His first target was a fallen knight who had been framed by the very kingdom he swore to protect. Berya used a scrying pool to locate the knight's current position in the southern borderlands. Time was of the essence, as the knight was scheduled for execution by sunrise. With a snap of his fingers, Berya opened a shadow portal, stepping through space with effortless grace. He appeared in the center of the prison courtyard, surrounded by terrified guards who had never seen a demon so close. He didn't even draw a weapon, simply letting his sheer presence crush the will of the soldiers. He reached the knight's cell and shattered the iron bars as if they were made of brittle glass. He offered the man a choice: die for a king who betrayed him, or live for a demon who would give him revenge. The knight took the hand, and in that moment the first piece of Berya's new world order fell into place. Back at the tower, Berya began the grueling task of reinforcing the structure against high-altitude storms. He ignored the traditional spiked traps, opting instead for complex spatial distortions and mana-draining mists. The knight, now cleaned and armed, watched in awe as the Demon King worked with the precision of a master craftsman. Berya explained that their next move would be to secure a steady supply of high-grade materials that only the dwarves possessed. He would not raid them as other Demon Kings did. He would make them an offer they couldn't refuse. But as he planned, a sudden ripple in the mana field alerted him to an approaching presence. Far below on the snowy slopes, a lone figure in a white cloak was trudging toward the tower against the wind. Berya realized this wasn't a hero, but something far more unexpected and potentially dangerous. The stranger collapsed just outside the main gate, a golden crest visible on their dying horse's saddle. Berya felt the distinct mana signature of the Hillen royal family, the very people who would eventually lead the crusade against him. Fate seemed to be delivering his enemies to his doorstep much earlier than he had anticipated. As the heavy gates slowly creaked open, Berya looked down at the unconscious princess and wondered if he should save her or let the cold finish his work. Berya looked down at the shivering form of Princess Alara and realized she was worth more alive than frozen. He commanded his skeletal guards to carry her into the warmth of the inner sanctum. The abduction of the first princess would surely send the Hillen kingdom into a state of absolute chaos. According to the old standards, he should have sacrificed her immediately to gain mana, but Berya had a better plan. He needed a diplomat and a bargaining chip, not a pile of charred remains. Once the princess was locked in the highest room, Berya turned his attention toward the local labor market. He knew that a legendary dwarven blacksmith named Braum was currently hiding in the nearby caves. Berya decided to pay the dwarf a visit before the human heroes could recruit him for their holy weapons. The trek through the Urgust peaks was treacherous for any normal demon, but Berya's regression had left him with veteran insights. He arrived at the dwarf's hidden workshop and kicked the heavy iron doors open without knocking. Braum, the blacksmith, jumped back in surprise, clutching a red-hot ingot like a defensive shield. Berya didn't offer gold, but instead offered the dwarf a chance to forge something that defied the laws of the gods. The dwarf's eyes widened as Berya described a defensive system made of shifting gears and mana-conductive steel. With Braum successfully recruited, the new Demon King set his sights on his next target, a disgraced high elf named Lyra. Lyra lived in exile within the Whispering Woods, hunted by her own kin for practicing forbidden spirit magic. Berya approached the elf's camp quietly, sensing the lethal trap she had laid in the underbrush. Lyra stood suddenly, drawing a bow made of white wood and aiming a mana-infused arrow at Berya's throat. Berya simply smiled and noted that her aim was slightly off due to her mana exhaustion. He offered her a place where her forbidden arts would be celebrated as the pinnacle of tower defense. The elf lowered her bow, realizing this Demon King was unlike any she had ever read about in the histories. By the time they returned to the tower, Berya had the foundations of the strongest construction team in the world. Braum immediately began installing heavy iron plating to the lower floors of the fortress. Lyra started weaving complex illusion spells into the surrounding mountain fog to hide the tower from prying eyes. Berya watched the progress and felt a sense of satisfaction he hadn't experienced in his previous life. He then went to check on the captured Princess Ilara, who was finally waking up in her cell. Ilara screamed as the door swung open, expecting to see a monster ready to devour her soul. To her surprise, Berya simply placed a tray of warm food on the table and sat down across from her. She asked him why he hadn't killed her yet, citing the standard behavior of the Demon King lineage. Berya laughed and explained that those standards were exactly why the previous Demon Kings always lost. He told her that she would serve as his voice to the human world, whether she liked it or not. Meanwhile, in the Hilden capital, the king was screaming at his generals for losing his eldest daughter. The hero Hillen, a young man with glowing blonde hair, stepped forward and swore an oath to rescue her. Hillen claimed that no demon tower could withstand the might of the holy sword for more than a day. Back at the tower, Braum had finished installing the first layer of surprise defenses, gas traps that triggered upon mana detection. Berya instructed Lyra to prepare a special reception for the heroes, focusing on psychological warfare rather than brute force. He wanted the heroes to feel hope before he systematically crushed their spirits. Through his scrying orb, Berya saw Hillen's party approaching the base of the Urgust Mountains. They were moving in a standard wedge formation, exactly like the military textbooks of the past predicted. Braum cackled as he activated the remote sensors, eager to see his mechanical masterpieces in action. Berya took one last sip of wine and stood up, ready to greet his old enemies from a previous life. As the heroes reached the first gate, they noticed it was wide open and completely unguarded. Hillen signaled for his party to stop, sensing that something was fundamentally wrong with this demon's lair. From the shadows of the battlements, Berya whispered a command that triggered a hidden mechanism beneath their feet. Suddenly, the ground beneath the hero party didn't explode, but instead turned into a frictionless slide leading deep into the dark earth. The hero party tumbled down the frictionless slide as the darkness swallowed their screams. Hillen desperately tried to stab his sword into the walls to slow their descent, but the blade only sparked and skidded off the polished surface. His companions collided with each other in the narrow space, their formation completely shattered by the sudden drop. The slide suddenly leveled out, launching them into a massive room filled with a thick, sweet-smelling pink mist. Hillen landed hard on a cushioned floor, coughing as the intoxicating aroma filled his lungs. He called out for his priestess and warrior, but only the sound of high-pitched giggling echoed back through the haze. The pink mist began to form illusions of his greatest desires, showing him a kingdom where he was already the king. He realized this was a psychological trap designed to drain his willpower and mana simultaneously. Suddenly the mist cleared to reveal his party members fighting each other, convinced they were battling demons. Hillen rushed forward to intervene, but a wall of heavy steel slammed down, separating him from his friends forever. A familiar cold voice boomed from the hidden speakers in the ceiling, welcoming the hero to the true graduation ceremony. Berya appeared on a balcony high above, looking down at the struggling hero with genuine pity. He explained that the old demon kings would have fought them fairly, but he preferred efficiency over tradition. Hillen watched in horror as the floor beneath his feet began to transform into a high-pressure water trap. He summoned the last of his holy energy to create a shield, but the water was infused with mana-dissolving salts. The hero collapsed as his shield shattered, the sheer weight of the trap crushing his spirit alongside his body. Berya descended the stairs slowly, his boots clicking rhythmically against the stone as he approached the defeated man. He held out a contract written in shimmering demonic ink, offering Hillen a choice between death or service. Hillen looked at the silhouettes of his fallen comrades and realized that his sense of justice had led them to a cold grave. Berya whispered that as a spy, Hillen could actually protect the kingdom from the corrupt nobles who sent him here to die. The hero's hand trembled as he reached for the quill, his mind spinning with the logic of the Demon King's words. With a final sigh of resignation, Hillen signed the contract, feeling the demonic curse bind itself to his very soul. Berya smiled warmly, welcoming his newest employee to the revolution against the world's status quo. He handed Hillen a communication crystal and detailed the first mission to sabotage the royal palace's internal guard. Hillen stood up, his eyes now carrying a faint purple tint that marked his new allegiance. He realized that the era of the Demon King and the hero was over, replaced by something much more calculated. Back in the throne room, the princess watched the scene through a magical mirror, feeling a strange sense of security. The dwarven blacksmith laughed heartily as he checked the data from the traps, noting how well the frictionless slide had performed. Berya sat back on his throne looking out at the snowy Urgust mountains that were once his place of exile. He knew that the kingdoms would soon send more heroes, but each failure would only provide him with more assets. The traditional rules of the Demon King were meant to keep him in a cage of inevitable defeat, but he had finally broken the bars. He watched through the tower windows as Hillen began his journey back to the capital, a wolf in sheep's clothing. The hero's transition was the final piece of the puzzle, ensuring that the human alliance would crumble from within. Berya raised his glass to the horizon, toasting to the new world order he was creating one trap at a time. The tower, once a symbol of banishment, was now the strongest fortress in the world. Berya realized that his regression wasn't just a second chance, but a total rewrite of the laws of existence. He promised himself that this time no hero would ever reach the throne with a sword in their hand. A new chapter of history was being written, one where the Demon King was the ultimate architect of destiny. Berya closed his eyes, listening to the silent, frozen wind of the mountains that acknowledged him as their master. Fate had been defied and the standard for the Demon King had been set forever,